But just talking about Michelson-Morley, I want you to, this is a great article here that I was reading the other day, because you'll now get people, this is always what happens, right? Is that when something doesn't fit their narrative, then they put a concerted effort to change it, right? Like, oh, this is a hoax. Oh, it was brought up by Walter, what's that guy's name? Something Irving, Walter Irving or whatever. He's the one who, it's a hoax that, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And they always have these like, oh, no, he wrote about it. And that's why, they've always had these answers. And in this case, their answer for whether or not Einstein knew about the Michelson-Morley experiment when he came up with relativity is now they try very hard to tell you that he didn't know about it. Yet the evidence is everywhere. That he spoke about it many times before in his presentation in Kyoto, which was 15 or something. He claims over and over again that, oh, by this time I did this, I started to hear about the Michelson-Morley. But we've seen many people, and these guys are like scholars who've come out and said, no. Based on this paper, he clearly knew exactly what's going on. This is where we're at. There's just a picture taken in the JJ Study Cambridge. I was trying to find the right thing, but carefully etched out cigarette. Oh, okay, that part I read. Milken. Nope. Convinced of the primary experiment. Milken Einstein took the. Okay. Let's go down a little bit more. It's in here, I think. Okay, so this is talking about whether or not Einstein knew. So I'll just read you a portion of this. It says, you want to read it with me? Let's do it. All right, so we're just reading this article. But it says here, there is some question as to whether Einstein even knew of Michelson's result when he wrote his 1905 relativity paper. In a 1950 interview, Einstein told Robert Shankland that he became aware of the result through the writings of Lorentz, but only after 1905. Otherwise, he said, I would have mentioned it in my paper. When Shankland raised the question again 2 years later, Einstein gave a different response. This is not so easy, he said. I'm not sure when I first heard of the Michelson experiment. I was not conscious that it had been influenced me directly during the 7 years that relativity had been my life. He added that in the years 1905 to 1909, he thought a great deal about Michelson's result. He then realized that he had been conscious of the result before 1905, partly from the papers of Lorentz and more because he had simply assumed the result of Michelson to be true. Abraham Pais, who knew Einstein well and wrote his scientific biography, was certain that Einstein did know about Michelson's experiment before 1905. He points out that Einstein was over 70 and in poor health when he spoke to Shankland at the first interview, and he probably did not remember that Michelson's experiment is discussed in Lorentz's 1895 monograph, the famous Versuch, which Einstein had definitely read before 1905. Even if Einstein was aware of Michelson's result, we must accept his assertion that it was not a major motivating factor in his discovery of relativity. He repeatedly uses terms like negligible, indirect, and not decisive to describe the influence of Michelson's experiment on his thinking. In a penetrating analysis of the issue, Gerald Holton concludes that the role of Michelson's experiment on the genesis of Einstein's theory appears to have been so small and indirect that one may speculate that it made no difference in Einstein's work if the experiment had never been made at all. And in the light of the assessment, Einstein's achievement looms all the more remarkable. If Einstein was not guided by the result of Michelson's experiment, then how did he arrive at relativity? He wouldn't have. That is the intriguing question. Einstein's paper provides little guidance. In it, the postulate of the constancy of the velocity of light is presented with no explanatory remarks or motivation, almost as though it were a routinely accepted proposition instead of a daring departure from conventional notions. In an autobiography essay written in 1949, Einstein describes a paradox that occurred to him at the age of 16. If one pursues a beam of light at velocity c, he notes, one should observe a spatially oscillatory electromagnetic field at rest, but there seems to be no such thing, either on the basis of experience or according to Maxwell's equations. From the very beginning, it appeared to me intuitively clear that, judging from the standpoint of such an observer, everything would happen according to the same laws for an observer who, relative to Earth, was at rest. The seed of the theory of relativity had evidently been planted when Einstein was only 16 years old. The idea that light has the same speed for all inertial observers, so difficult for an ordinary mind to accept, seemed quite natural to Einstein. He was fully prepared to accept it even without experimental evidence. This is a problem with Einstein. He never did experiments. He's a theorist. In the Shankland interview, Einstein said that the experiment results that had influenced him the most were the observations of stellar aberration and Figeau's experiment on the speed of light in moving water. They were enough, he said. This assertion is perplexing because both stellar aberration and the result of Figeau's experiment are readily accounted for without relativity. Figeaud, in fact, thought he had confirmed Fresnel's ether drag theory. Milken emphasizes that modern science, unlike Greek philosophy and all medieval thinking, takes as its starting point well-authenticated, carefully tested experimental facts. This is almost universally true, but relativity appears to be one of the few exceptions. It is easy enough to understand Milken's desire to give Michelson credit. He was an experimenter and he greatly admired Michelson, under whom he had worked as a young man. The scenario he described was one he wanted to believe, but the true genesis of special relativity apparently lay in Einstein's inspired intuition. Sure. As is well known, Einstein's paper contains no references whatsoever. It does refer to an unsuccessful effort to discover any motion of the Earth relative to the light medium, without identifying any of those efforts. The Michelson-Morley experiment was only one of them. Einstein's first reference to the Michelson-Morley experiment was a review article he wrote in 1907. And if we kept reading, which is a long kind of conversation here, let me see if we get down here. It's about Einstein's character being an example of distinguished feature. So what we get here is that, and again, I had to go after Brenda on this one because you're going to have people tell you that it was a failed experiment and they got a null result. They got a null result, meaning they didn't get the speed that they were looking for. If the Earth were traveling through the ether as it moved around the sun, then you would expect the speed of the ether to be 33,000 miles per hour, because you would say the Earth going 66,000 miles per hour would it be half? Maybe not. Maybe it is 66. Anyway, what they were looking for, they found 1/40th. Okay, so if you take 66,000 and multiply that by 1/40th, you get about 1,400 miles per hour, which is about the speed of the sun in the south, which could be seen as the speed of the ether doing its toroidal spiral at the North Pole. So here's the issue with that. Because there was a speed detected, which they try and hide. They call it a failed experiment because it didn't get the results that they wanted. This is why Einstein eventually said there's no optical experiment that can show that we move and all those things. But there was a speed difference. Now, if there's a difference, then we've got a problem with relativity, because we're told that all the speed of light is the same for every direction, but it's not. Light has a preferred direction. Imagine that. And it has exactly to do with what Bob has shown, what Austin has shown, and that is what appears to be the ether, or the sky moving, causing those reactions below, right? So once you realize that, then they had to implement these length contractions. Why is that? Because they had to explain away, why are we getting a result? Why are we showing such a slow speed? So they had to say, oh, well, you know what it is? It's because the arm of the device is retracting. It's getting smaller as it goes faster. We can never see that. We'll never be able to prove that, but these equations help us and they get us there. And this is how you know gravity is not true, is because it's their baby. They have done whatever they can to keep it on the plate. Even if observations don't match it, make up dark energy, dark matter. No matter what you come up with, they will never give up on gravity. Even though anybody can pick up an item right now, pick up an item that's in front of you, and I want you to feel it. And you tell me, is the necessity of that item to go down coming from the item itself or coming from the ground pulling it down? You tell me. Clearly, this pen has weight and density. I can feel it. It wants to go down because of that weight, because there's no air to hold it up. If I had a glass of water and I dropped it, it would sit on top of the glass of water. But there's no water. There's nothing to hold it up, so it has only one direction to go, and that is down, where things of mass go, is down. Now, they want to tell you about manifolds and space-time and time. I mean, first of all, one of the dumber things that I've ever heard in my life is people who think space travel is real. I'm sorry, not space travel. That's one too, but time travel. It's just people need to think that that could never be real. Okay? Like, let's wake up and let's start using our heads and be smart enough to recognize that their idea of time travel is to take the fabric of space-time, which doesn't exist, to fold it, poke a hole through it, and then you just go through the folded paper and you get to, that's fake. That's not real. That's not, why would we give anybody any kind of credit like that? Other than that, how could you go back or forward in time? In case you don't realize it, the past doesn't exist. The past is gone. Okay? Now exists, and the future will exist. So there is no way to travel into the will exist. That makes no sense. And there is no way to travel into the already happened. Dumb. Easy. What do you know? It's that easy to disprove time travel, but not. I mean, these guys, they believe we can fold space-time and then you go through wormholes and people eat it up. They love it. Trying to see if I can just get to this one part of this paper. Oh, I think I went past it. Let me see the back here. Anyway, just so you know, yes, it's been determined by these scholars that Einstein did know about it. Whether he claims, and again, in his book, he even said, about this time, I came to the realization that the Michelson-Morley, he even says that. But you notice they don't say that here. Because what they're really trying to do is erase history, change history. Because as things don't make sense, or as things are like, oh, we don't know about that, we don't want to change that, they just change history and right in front of our face. And you'd be like, wait, I thought that Galileo did drop balls from the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Well, I thought that an apple did fall on Newton's head. Well, it's like a religious story. We told you a religious story because we know that it works because we've watched Catholics do it forever. That's the sad fact of what's going on. Everybody's being lied to. Everybody's being fooled. And that's the way you make money in this world. I could make money tomorrow if I felt like screwing people, scamming people. That's easy. Anybody could. And so good for you if you're one of those people out there that is taking the high road. I'm not always sure it's the best road. I'm not always sure I will be rewarded for it, but I'm like, it's the right thing to do, right? And that's what's important. I feel like we have to be rewarded for doing what's right. If not, well then, certainly better than, sorry, somebody in my driveway. Okay. Anyway, getting away from that. So let me see if that was all I wanted to say on there. I thought there was something else. No. Something else with that thing. What did I miss? Okay, maybe it's on this one. I read the wrong paper completely. Yeah, looks like I did. Great. All right, so let me show you this. This is the paper I was trying to get to. Browser. No. Let's go browser. There we go. So yeah, and this is a great paper. I'm going to link it in t.me/journalism links. It is on the role of Michelson-Morley experiment, Einstein in Chicago. Hey, this guy's name is Jeroen. Hey, Jeroen. From the Institute of History and Foundations of Science and Descartes Center. Abstract is this article discusses new material published in volume 12 of the collected papers of Albert Einstein that address Einstein's knowledge of the Michelson-Morley experiment prior to 1905. In a lecture in Chicago in 1921, Einstein referred to this experiment, mentioned when he came upon it, and hinted at its influence. Arguments are presented to explain the contrast of Einstein's later pronouncements on the role of the experiment. Because as time went on, he of course had to get rid of the idea that the only reason relativity is there is because of the Michelson-Morley. So this is why when you've got people who consider themselves flat earthers or debate leaders or whatever they call themselves, and they don't understand Michelson-Morley and dismiss it as a parlor trick, those people are retards. They don't understand anything that they're doing. They don't understand anything about this experiment. They don't understand its centrality in the idea of relativity. Once you have relativity, then you've got everything that goes with it. And it all happened because why? Because they had to explain away the results that the Earth does not move. And if it does move, it moves 1,400 miles per hour and that's it. So if it moves 1,400 miles per hour, it's not going around the sun. Okay. So they get stuck and then they have to kind of make shit up and piece things together. And they put in air stuff for GPS because, again, there is a speed preference in one direction, which flies directly in the face of relativity. But these things are all programmed into GPS, so you never see them happen. But it's a known fact that GPS has that mistake plugged into it so that it makes up for the fact that light does have a preferred direction. Trying to see if I can just find a good paragraph. This is when he went to Kyoto. The passage suggests, okay, we'll just read from here. The passage suggests that Michelson-Morley experiment did, after all, influence Einstein in a direct way and was relevant in the construction of the theory. Nevertheless, considerable debate has persisted, focusing on the translation of the Kyoto Address. Notes of the lecture were taken in Japanese by Einstein's interpreter, Jun Ishiwara. 2 English translations appeared in 1979-1982. These translations indeed implied a direct role for the Michelson-Morley experiment, but they have been criticized by Cieza Abiko and Ryoichi Chikikaka. Regrettably, these critics are, however, not agreed on what a proper translation should be. According to Ichigaki, the above passage taken from Abiko should read, "But when, still as a student, I had these thoughts in my mind, if I had known the strange result of Michelson's experiment and I had acknowledged it as a fact, I probably would have come to realize it intuitively as our mistake to think about the motion of the Earth against the ether. For scholars who do not master the Japanese language, and given that Einstein actually delivered his lectures in German, it is thus difficult now to know Einstein's precise words in Kyoto on the Michelson-Morley experiment. Fortunately, recently uncovered documents show that a year earlier, Einstein addressed the issue on a similar occasion in Chicago. During his first trip to the United States, Einstein visited Chicago in early May 1921. The main purpose was to raise funds for the creation of the Hebrew University, in Jerusalem, one of the main causes of the Zionist movement that had enlisted Einstein's support. The Zionist leadership had asked him to accompany a delegation and had encouraged him to lecture at American universities, leading Einstein to agree to an engagement at University of Chicago. Einstein would give 3 lectures at the university and 1 at a local school, the Francis W. Parker School. He had hoped that his visit would give him an opportunity to meet local scientists, most prominent Robert Milken and Albert A. Michelson. Michelson was gone, blah, 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 blah. He gave 3 lectures. We'll go down to here. The record of Einstein's spoken words at Parker School, likely on May 4th, fits on just 2 pages, which is less than the case of his lectures at university. The notes, presumably taken by the same person, were also transcribed by Miss Zimmerman. The typed text may not be a complete record of Einstein's actual words. It is likely that he discussed his route to the general theory of relativity at greater length than the single sentence available. Then I made the second discovery of my life. That is the discovery of the inertia and gravity. However, Einstein probably only delivered a very brief talk at the beginning. He announced that he would only address a few words of his audience. This gives us greater confidence in the reliability of the recorder's rendition of Einstein's word, despite its brevity. Nevertheless, the somewhat confused nature of the statement on the general theory does emphasize that one should be alert to the possibility that the quality of the rendition of the Parker lecture is not necessarily consistent. In any case, the notes do contain a full coherent paragraph on Einstein's early thinking in relation to the special theory of relativity. Now, you can read this and you can recognize that this is Einstein's words. This is nobody trying to cheat. There's nobody trying to lie. This is somebody giving you Einstein's words. Now, the relativists, the science backers, those pushing dark energy, the globe, everything, they will not admit this. They will tell you that this is either transcribed wrong, because what it does is it leads to the discovery that everything that they've done since Michelson-Morley is to cover up for the fact that the Earth does not move experimentally. Okay? As a young man, I was interested as a physicist in the question what the nature of light, and in particular, what is the nature of light with respect to bodies. That is, as a child, I was already taught that light is subordinate to the oscillations of light ether. If that is the case, then one should be able to detect it, and thus I thought about whether it would be possible to perceive through some experiment that the Earth moves in the ether. But when I was a student, I saw that experiments of this kind had already been made, and particularly your compatriot Michelson. He proved that one does not notice anything on Earth that it moves, but that everything takes place on the Earth as if it were a state of rest. The detail and coherence of the passage above suggests that it is likely complete and accurate in reproducing Einstein's spoken words. In the next paragraph, Einstein continued with his comment on the general theory given above. What does the Parker School may imply for our understanding of Einstein's relationship to the Michelson-Morley experiment and its influence on the creation of the special theory? Taking the text at face value, there can be no doubt that Einstein knew of Michelson-Morley's experiment prior to 1905. He attributed a significant role to ether drift experiments in general and singled out the Michelson-Morley experiment for specific mention. It further suggests that Einstein had learned of the experiment before becoming convinced of the principle of relativity, contrary to his later recollections. Einstein's reference to his student days leads one to believe that he may have had his mind on these ideas of ether drift from 1899. His comments perhaps concern the experiment that he briefly mentioned in a letter to Minerva. A good idea occurred to me about a way of investigating how bodies' relative motion with respect to the luminiferous ether affect the velocity of propagation of light in transparent bodies. His next letter was dated 28 September, is the letter that informed her that he had just read Wynn's article, i.e. the article containing the Michelson-Morley experiment, among a discussion of other experiments, which confirms Einstein's usage of the plural experiments of this kind in the lecture in Chicago. Einstein made no further mention of the work of electrodynamics on moving bodies until 1901, but by then he was no longer a student. And so don't let anybody tell you that he didn't know about Michelson-Morley or didn't care about it. Even though he said that later in his life, it can be proven that he, in fact, was either lying later in his life or didn't remember. Okay. He saw that they were not getting the correct speed going around the sun. So they basically had a choice to make, and they decided, well, let's just say that the interferometer arms are shrinking, and that's why we did get a small amount, and that's why there's a preference. It's because of the apparatus gets smaller as we move faster. Oh, it's just all horseshit, right? None of it has any rhyme or reason or fact, but this is what is all it takes to be, get, I don't know, funds in science. Where is this one here? All right. His short message on the 1952 Michelson centenary, along with its citations of the Fijau experiment and the aberration, implied the denial of a strong role for the Michelson-Morley experiment. It pointedly ended with, there is, of course, no logical way leading to the establishment of a theory, but only groping, constructive attempts controlled by careful consideration of factual knowledge. Okay. This strongly suggests that Einstein's intended audience were overambitious empiricists. As he wrote in his intellectual autobiography in 1949, the positivistic philosophical attitude suffered from a prejudice. The prejudice consists in a faith that facts by themselves can and should yield scientific knowledge without free conceptual construction. The Michelson-Morley experiment is only one among a melee of factors that put Einstein on the path of the special theory, including the thought experiment of moving coil and magnet. His Chicago lecture does not warrant a return to the old lores promulgated by Milken, yet the contrast it exhibits with the other Einstein pronouncements on the role of the experiment casts doubt on the accuracy of his late personal recollections and draws attention to their specific philosophical context. Plus, he boned his cousin, his first cousin and his second cousin. And that's the same person. His cousin was his second cousin as well. Figure that one out. Anyway, great paper. I'm going to put that in go back. I'm going to put that in t.me/journalism links. It's a good read. Let's do that. t.me/journalism links. Boom. Boom. Okay, you're in there if you want that. Take it away.